Okay, so for years, the names connected to the Jeffrey Epstein story were just whispers, right? Well, not anymore. Thousands of pages of court documents have just been unsealed, and now those whispers are out in the open, on public record. But with this flood of information, you're probably asking, what does it all actually mean? Let's break down what's really going on here.
But before we dive into all the legal jargon and the list of famous names, we have to ground ourselves in what this story is really about. It's about the staggering human cost, and nothing captures that more than the chilling words of the people who actually lived through it.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll start with what's in these files. Then we'll look at the two people at the center of it all. We'll get into how their whole scheme worked, why no one stopped them for so long, and finally, we'll talk about the big questions that are still hanging in the air.
All right, first up, the files. This is the big event that's got everyone talking and has thrown this whole story right back into the spotlight. You know, the first thing that just jumped out at everyone was this number. Over 150 people, publicly identified. And we're not just talking about anyone. This list has former presidents, actual royalty, giants of the business world, Hollywood A-listers. I mean, the sheer scale of this is just staggering. Okay, but it is absolutely crucial to understand what these documents are and what they aren't. This is not some new criminal indictment. It's not the infamous client list people have talked about for years. The vast majority of these files, they come from a civil lawsuit back in 2015. So what we're reading is sworn testimony, depositions, and evidence all tied to that one specific case.
And that lawsuit, well, and this entire horrifying criminal operation, it all revolved around two people.
Think of Epstein and Maxwell as a twisted kind of partnership. They each had their role. Epstein, he was the money and the power, this mysterious financier at the hub of it all. But Ghislaine Maxwell, she was the key that unlocked everything for him. She brought the high society connections, the access to the elite, and this is so important, she was the main recruiter.
And this quote right here just drives that home. Let's be really clear. She was not some sidekick. She was an architect of this whole thing. As the journalist points out, there's just no way Epstein could have gotten away with what he did without her. And victims have testified that she wasn't just a recruiter. She was often right there in the room, actively participating in the abuse.
So, it begs the question, right? How did they manage to abuse so many girls for so long? Well, the testimony makes it chillingly clear. This wasn't random, not at all. It was a system, a methodical, predatory business model. It was basically a four-step playbook. Step 1, target vulnerable girls, often from poor backgrounds. Step 2, lure them in. They'd offer cash, sometimes just $200 for a so-called massage, and dangle these big promises of a better life, education, travel. Step 3, the abuse. This would happen in isolation at one of Epstein's huge properties. And then step 4, this is the most twisted part. They would coerce the victims into recruiting other girls, forcing them to perpetuate the very cycle that trapped them.
And that is why people call it a vile pyramid scheme. It's tragically accurate. I mean, just listen to the words of Courtney Wild, who was only 14 when this happened to her. You can just feel the weight of the guilt and shame. This cycle was literally designed to feed itself.
Okay, so this whole operation ran for decades, which brings us to maybe the most infuriating question of all. How on earth did they get away with it for so long?
Well, this timeline tells a pretty damning story of systemic failure and pure intimidation. Look at this. As early as 1996, a victim goes to the FBI. What happens? Nothing. In 2002, a huge magazine, Vanity Fair, investigates and then backs down after Epstein threatens them. And even when he's finally arrested in 2006, with evidence from over 40 victims, he still manages to get a plea deal that is just unbelievable.
Yeah, let's talk about that infamous 2008 plea deal. Calling it a slap on the wrist doesn't even begin to cover it. He served just 13 months. And get this, during that time, he was allowed to leave jail for 12 hours a day on work release. But here's the real kicker. The deal gave immunity not just to him, but to, and I'm quoting here, any alleged co-conspirators, known or unknown. It was a get-out-of-jail-free card for his entire network. And the victims? They were never even told about it.
Which brings us to right now. Epstein is dead, Maxwell is in prison. So you might be wondering, okay, what's the point of releasing all these files now? And this really gets to the heart of all the confusion you're seeing online. We know it's not a criminal list of clients, so why does it matter? Why is it a big deal that all these powerful people are named?
Here's why it matters.
It boils down to two words: knowledge and accountability. These people were named because victims, under oath, said they were there, on the private island, in the mansions, on the plane. So the critical question isn't necessarily what crime did they commit, it's what did they see and what did they know. Just being there, in a place where this systematic abuse was happening, raises huge, serious questions about their judgment and, frankly, about willful ignorance.
And then there's this. The documents hint at something even more sinister. People have suspected for a long time that this wasn't just about sex. It was about power and leverage. Well, now, for the first time, we have sworn statements suggesting Epstein was literally quizzing girls for details about powerful people. This long-held suspicion of blackmail? These files just poured gasoline on that fire.
So with all of this coming out, what have we heard from the many powerful people named in these files? Mostly, nothing. A deafening silence. The two architects might be gone, but the network of people who enabled them, who associated with them, they're still here.
So yeah, thousands of pages are finally out in the open, but this story is far from over. The files are open, we're getting a clearer picture of who is there, what they might have seen, who is in his orbit. Which leaves us with the one final, massive question. Will there ever be a full and total accounting for everyone involved?